Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today we're looking at the Herbert class. I'm bringing this one up because trying to look for the actual Herbert class, we did find a USS Herbert, but this is actually a New Orleans class starship, not a Herbert class. So this one actually comes from, looks like Last Unicorn, possibly. It might even be from Decipher originally. Trying to see where. Nope, Last Unicorn. Okay, because looking at the graphic here, it does look more like a Last Unicorn than what Decipher had done. What I'm talking about is from Decipher. So we'll get into the Decipher here, and we'll take a look. All right, looking at our Decipher here, and unfortunately that print is a little. For the copy that I've gotten offline, it's a little rough for me to read. So, actually, having my Decipher book. So, heralded as one of the fastest and best designed cargo vessels of its age, the Herbert class has withstood the test of time. These cargo vessels can carry or can still be found throughout the Federation in both Starfleet and civilian sector. Noted for the large cargo containers housed in its underbelly, the Herbert has been nicknamed the plump performer throughout the space lanes. The Herbert requires a small crew to uh, maintain the vessel and features an excellent top speed, making her the transport of choice when cargo must arrive within a short amount of time. Unfortunately, her warp engines have a deserved reputation of being testy, especially under heavy loads. The Herbert contains adequate dense defenses to repel all but the most determined space renegades, but her shield grid is unable to deflect much of the damage before help can arrive. So just kind of leaving it at that. Now, what we do have listed here, and as we can go down through all this, this is about 5 decks tall. The actual ship is 5 decks. So let's just kind of keep that in mind. What we're looking at is the ship plus the containers. Now, these are the old standard containers that we used to see really as a holdover from the original series, as well as what would have been still used in the movie era. So, being a derivative of the Oberth, this is still a holdover from a lot of that style of mechanics. So keeping it in that regard. All right. So the ship itself is 5 decks. It's 247 meters long, not including the cargo containers, which I believe stick out a little bit more in the back here, as we can see the long warp nacelles on the sides. Let's see. Complement is only 6 personnel. You could probably get by with one if you really needed to, but anyways, transporters is listed as 2. Now this is where things get a little interesting because it's a different game mechanics. In the Decipher, it's listed as being or as having 250 cargo units. Now, when we look at it as far as a Galaxy class in the Decipher version, that had 80. I believe it was. Actually, I flipped the page here. That's got 80 cargo units. So it is more than anyone else. But most of the area has been stripped down to just housing the 6 personnel. So I will have to make a slight adjustment on how many personnel we can actually carry. We've gotten rid of all the science and all that stuff. It's just nothing but a cargo hauler. Okay, let's see. We do have tractor beams forward and aft. No separation system is listed because that's part of their mechanics. Sensor system is a class 2, so I will have to change that. I knew it was on here, I just didn't know where it was. So I will have to change the sensor system to reflect that. I currently have it as a 5. So that really tells you The last ship we had was another cargo vessel, and that was a class 5 sensor system. This is relegated down to a class 2, so a much simpler sensor system than what we would have seen otherwise. But on the other hand, when we look at the Oberth, it's got a big sensor system because of the secondary hull, which is all the science and everything else that you would really find in there. All right. Impulse, and I have this in here. It's a class 4. It has a 0.85 Cochrane, and the warp speed is a class 5, which gives it a standard cruise of warp 5, max cruise of warp 6, and a max rated for warp 7. Has type 5 phasers, and it looks like there's two of them. That's what I have on board our ship. It goes by their penetration and their system here. Oops. And then protection threshold is a 15.2. Not a very good shield system. I just left what we had from our last one, just telling you where we get all this stuff from here. Um, and then design defect warp drive. Now, when we look at this in comparison to the actual Oberth, which is the page right before, you guys don't get to see it, but I do. Um, as this was commissioned in 2341. Now, in 2341, they went through upgrading a lot of the Oberth class vessels. So, what they may have done is they may have taken some of the older ones that really weren't worth upgrading, and they just knocked them down to being the Herbert class here. And really, the funny thing is looking at it on the back side here, and hopefully you're looking at it. If you're not, I do apologize. We have our engineering section under our saucer here, which is all just kind of really compact, and it gets cut off right past our engineering instead of going back and adding on our shuttle bays. So that really only gives us, say, our front shuttle bay on here um, to kind of work with. Possibly even the side ones aren't even there. It's just the front one. So just kind of keeping that in mind, mainly because we only have 6 personnel on board. We don't have a huge need for a shuttle bay, but having one for a lifeboat and all that does make a lot of sense. And going from there. So with that, let's get on to our D6 stats and see what I've created to really kind of bring it into our modern D6 universe that we're working with. All right, so here we are with the D6 stats. Hopefully, I got everything kind of worked out how I want it. Having to go through this a couple times here, just trying to make sure I'm getting this kind of ported over from the last one here. All right, so the Herbert class light transport. It's a cargo carrier actually, and I kind of messed up because again, it's just one of those things. I thought I had this in here, but I didn't do it. Trying to go through line by line, but then sometimes when I'm doing this, um, because of where everything's kind of being presented, then I kind of go up and down on the list here. So it's a cargo carrier, capital class, 247 meters long. Now, I left the ship mass being about the same, 233,000 metric tons. Size 5 category. Those aren't going to change all that much. I could lower it down to 200,000. I left the 233 because it's within that range. Uh, just letting you know where that kind of comes from. Autopilot, I figured that that could stay where it is. Crew of 6, skeleton of 1. Passengers, you know, originally I had 30. I'm going to keep it down to about 10. If this is really gutted out just for cargo, 10 sounds a little bit better than 30. So just kind of keeping it at that. That does give us our cargo capacity at about 60,000 metric tons. Now, the way I got that is this, and I'm just going to throw it out here, whether I'm right or wrong. So, um, the Defiant has 50 cargo units, okay, in the Decipher book. So I went to the Defiant and I multiplied it by 5. So that comes up to about 60. So 600, or that would have been 60,000, which is still less than what we're seeing for the Galaxy class. So I added an extra zero. That may be wrong yet. Maybe it should be closer to 60,000, but yeah, why don't we put it at because it's really the cargo containers that we're going off of. Let me just drop that down because that seems a little excessive, but it's supposed to be more than what the Galaxy class has. So, however you want to work that, that's where I was getting the number from, and because 60 looks, it's still less than I believe what the Galaxy class has. Um, the Galaxy, I believe, was still at I think like 330,000. So I wanted to be a little bit more than that, but if we're just hauling the containers, we're hauling two of them. Where before we'd had like the Plutoni class, and that would haul one of those containers or two in tandem. This one's holding two side by side, just kind of going from there. We still have the consumables of 3 years. The warp drive, as you can see, like it was listed as being a standard speed, standard warp cruise of 5. Max is 6, and max rated is 7 for 6 hours. It didn't give us a time frame, so I could have had it at 6 or 8 or 12 or something like that. I figured 6 hours is fine. Of course, we're going to have our nav computer, keeping the maneuverability low. So that's still our 0D plus 2, the same as what we've had before. Space is at a 0.85 Cochrane, so I figured 8.5 would work for that. Our hull being a 2D plus 2, still what we saw in the Deneva, and the shields is 1D plus 2, keeping everything roughly in line where everything should be here. Now, it did say that the shields were not the greatest, so perhaps what I should do is drop them down a little bit more. Um, and if I can look at this real quick, warp drive, through all my different lists of everything, how everything kind of works. Um, I don't know if I have the right sheets here or not. Just thinking about the hull. I don't know which sheet I have that for. Like I said, I mean, I've got a bunch of different sheets here trying to keep everything in line, in continuity with each other. I don't think I've got that. Sitting here, this is all different. I've got all my weapon sheets, but I don't have my hull. Um, which always makes things interesting. And then I flip to a different book and see if I have it in here. All right, um, so this is where I'm getting the hull from is actually a little bit more for trying to figure out uh, for our Star Wars. So just leaving it at that um, because we're going back and forth and just trying to figure all this out. All right, capital ship being dun, da, da, da. Base hull is 2 pips, size 6. So we're seeing that this should be roughly about a size 6 according to that. Um, Structure shielding. Capital 1D plus 1. So that's what we'll make it. We'll make it a 1D plus 1. Through all the, like I said, through all the different charts and everything else that I've got, just trying to keep everything in alignment with each other. Sometimes, and you guys see it, I'm trying to keep everything roughly correct. So it's a 1D plus 1. Sensors, we have a Type 2 platform here. So unlike the Deneva having a Type 5, we have a passive that we can go out to 3 kilometers with a 0D bonus, an active scan out to 8 kilometers at a 0D plus 1 bonus. Our active search is out to 12 kilometers at a 0D plus 1 bonus, and our focus is out to 500 meters at a plus 2 bonus. Now we do have our two Type 5 phasers, and that gives us a rate of fire of 3. Damage is 2D. This is in the forward of uh, our forward arc here, dorsal and ventral. With the containers and all that, I just don't see really having much in the back. We have our weapon or our engine mounts here. I don't think we're going to have anything facing the rear. So just kind of throwing that out there. Um, then, of course, we have our tractor beams trying to get our containers here uh, just put in there. Going with all the other fun things that we have, our tractor beam for our shuttle bay, uh, 5 decks, 6 escape pods, 3 on each side is what I figure. Uh, Capacity is going to be 4. This was commissioned in 2341. We have 2 personal transporters for 6 personnel in each, 2 emergencies for 18 personnel, and 8 cargo transporters. Now, this is going to have room, I figure, for 2 shuttlecraft and 1 shuttle pod. Although, honestly, I think you would probably only find 1 shuttle on board. Having room for an extra shuttle to come on board for any onloading, offloading of cargo or something like that would make some sense. Just throwing that out there. So that really wraps up our ship here. You know, I was really hoping I could find some other information on the Herbert outside of what we have. But like when I mentioned in the very beginning, what I did find is the USS Herbert, which is really a different ship, different class of ship in all. So this one coming from Decipher, the small ships that I like, it really works. You could have a small little crew, even if you just leave it as, you got one as a retired ship and you're using it for your base. Yes, you could carry the containers. We can always upgrade these ships in a D6 sense and have fun with it. It just adds that scale of being able to play with a small group of friends around a table. These are the ships that I really enjoy, and going from there. With that being said, thank you so very much for joining me today. It's always wonderful having you here. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you in the next video.